Chinese love China. Not every Chinese who's wanting to escape to the West and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of Western propaganda. And by the way, Chris, I've decided that going on, I'm going to be reading books on China by Chinese so that I don't have Western gatekeepers telling me what China is.
Welcome to Overlap, brought to you by Wave Media. My name is Chris. I'm an ex-journalist and a media content creator in China. Today, I'm really thrilled to be in conversation with Trevor Ncube, a veteran journalist and entrepreneur from the great nation of Zimbabwe. Welcome, Trevor.
Thank you so much, Chris. What a pleasure and a privilege to be with you. I'm looking forward to our conversation, Chris. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So I've did a little bit of homework about your past. So from what I understand is that you are from the western part of Zimbabwe, and you ran newspapers and other forms of media. You have been in this industry for a very long time. And it's a rather recent development that you have started your podcast, In Conversation with Trevor. Please tell us about all this story. I bet it's wonderful.
Right. Thank you, Chris. So interestingly, Chris, I'm not a trained journalist. I never went to a school of journalism. I got into journalism by mistake in 1989, and I've never looked back. I suppose I must say that I was reflecting recently what it is that drives me. I think that's important for me. What drives me is I've always wanted to be part of creating, shaping, and molding societies using the power of media, shaping opinions, shaping public perceptions, but towards the good of society. Towards the good of society. So I've been attracted more to what one would call heavy lifting news, as it were, investigative analysis, news that you might use, as it were, rather than I take a very dim view towards tabloid news because I compare tabloid news to junk food. You eat it, it makes you fat, it's unhealthy, and you don't gain anything good from it. That is the same thing with tabloid news. The scandals, the sex scandals, the nude videos, and so forth, add very little to our societies, as it were, to the world, to humanity. But unfortunately, that is what has become the most important thing. Anyway, I ran ahead of myself. So I got into journalism, Chris, as a reporter in 1981, as a business reporter for a newspaper called the Financial Gazette. And inside 2 years, I had been appointed to become the editor-in-chief of the Financial Gazette, and I lasted for 7 years. I got fired by my boss for what my boss accused me of being. He said I hated Robert Mugabe, and I was out to bring down Robert Mugabe. That is in 1989. I didn't hate him. I know I didn't hate him, but our newspapers, the newspaper that I edited, the Financial Gazette at that time, tended to be the leading investigative newspaper. And that's the things that Robert Mugabe was doing. At that time, Robert Mugabe was trying to push Zimbabwe to become a one-party state, to become a dictatorship. And for me as a Democrat, at that time as a Democrat, freedom of expression, press freedom were things that were very important to me. So there became a clash between what I represented, what I stood for, and what Robert Mugabe did not like, because what we were doing was against what he wanted. So I then got fired. When I got fired, Chris, I then became one of the founders of the Zimbabwe Independent and the Standard, became the editor of the Zimbabwe Independent. And then in a short space of time, we then launched other paper, the Standard, and then I became a shareholder and the editor of the Zimbabwe Independent. Fast forward in 1991, I bought out the other two shareholders, three other shareholders rather, that were in the Zimbabwe Independent, and ended up being the majority shareholder, 100% shareholder. Then I launched a daily, the Newsday, and then we formed a group that we called Alpha Media Holdings. We formed Alpha Media Holdings. Again, fast forward quickly, an opportunity arose in South Africa in 2002, July of 2002. I bought from the British, a newspaper, from a British company, from the Guardian rather, the Guardian PLC of London. I bought the Mail and Guardian in 2002, and then moved to be in South Africa as a way of to be closer to a newspaper that was troubled at that time. And I owned and ran the Mail and Guardian for 15 years before I decided to exit, because I just didn't have the money to continue funding this very important South African newspaper, the Mail and Guardian. So, and then 7 years ago, again, Chris, seized by that desire for journalism that informs, journalism that is positive, journalism that encourages conversations such as one that we're having right now, I launched a very successful podcast platform called In Conversation with Trevor. As I'm sitting close to we're sitting with you right now, we're sitting on 10 million views with 79,000 subscribers, which is quite a big achievement for a country as small as Zimbabwe. So in a nutshell, Chris, that is who I am.
It's definitely a very wonderful experience, a very long career in journalism. So from my understanding is you are now reaching out to millions of listeners or viewers, not only in Zimbabwe, but also in South Africa and other African nations. Am I right?
Yeah, you're right. So we are now reaching to across the continent, across the globe. Our states on YouTube particularly show us that our biggest viewers, Chris, are in the UK, in South Africa. So in South Africa, in Australia, in New Zealand, and then some all across the continent. So we've become a global platform, Chris, a global platform that celebrates Zimbabweans and Africans that are doing amazing things. It's basically a mentorship platform through talking to people about why they're doing what they're doing, how they're doing the things that they're doing, the challenges that they're experiencing, the successes, why they've succeeded, why they've failed. I've realized, Chris, that our stories, your story, my story, contain so much aspects of mentorship, of teaching others, that our stories of failure and our stories of success can be used as teaching moment. And this is what this platform is doing.
I have watched quite a number of episodes from your podcast. You have talked to, the one that got me interested was you have interviewed Professor Zhang Weiwei from Fudan University. And also I have seen other interview conversations with entrepreneurs, with officials like ambassadors. It feels to me that you approach these people with a very humble attitude. Is that you want them to talk about their experience instead of, you have a pre-made narrative that you want to shuffle down your viewer's throat. It's a very different type of thing from whereas in the past traditional media, I would say. What do you think?
Absolutely. I agree with you, and you get me completely. One thing that I do, Chris, for instance, people say, oh, can you give me the questions that you're going to discuss? I have no questions. I have no set questions. The questions arise as we talk. And the model that I've come up with, Chris, is one that says, I have no agenda except to hear your story. I'm going to listen to your story. I'm going to give you, my only agenda is to give you a platform to tell your story. And if I listen carefully, which is what I do, and ask you questions based on what you've said, rather than ask you questions based on my research, I'm going to go down a tunnel, which is not all right. So my research informs me to be in a position to ask intelligent questions when the guest responds to some of the issues that I've raised. So it's a template that draws as much as possible from the guest. As a result, each episode tends to be different from the other episode because it's all about what does the guest have to say rather than what is it that Trevor wants to achieve. It's not my agenda. It's the agenda of what the guest has to say.
Yeah, you're nowhere, but you're everywhere. That's
Absolutely. Something like that.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, to continue our conversation, I think it helps if I introduce myself, what I have done in the past, a little bit more so that we can have a conversation. To begin, I think I have done a podcast, very humble, very little podcast myself. We have just begun. I've tried it for the past year, I would say with very moderate success, because I used to work for this organization. It's called Guancha News in China. We started Guancha in 2012. That was about 12 years ago. It's China's leading, if not the only, private media, private independent media in China. So we started off as a commentary blog, and then we moved to day-to-day news, and then I started to create curated videos to present information to our viewers. And after a while, I think the format of podcast is gaining momentum. And I thought, why don't we just conduct some experiment, try to invite people to tell their story and try to create long-form videos. It's a little bit, I had a lot of interesting conversation with fantastic people. The people have done very interesting things. But it seems to me that we are yet to find the way to convey this interesting content, to deliver this interesting content to our viewers. A lot of Chinese internet users are not used to such long-form videos. They like, Douyin, as Chinese TikTok.
Yeah.
They like to swipe across the screen. So people in my profession, they lament, these people, they are just mentally lazy. They just love entertainment. They don't really want to go after truth. They don't want to hear complete stories with different angles and nuances. It seems to me that we as content creators have yet to find a way. And I think I want to hear from you, as you have done very successfully with your channel.
But before I do that, I must ask you though, why did you decide to go independent and to do long form journalism? Why did you decide to do that?
The primary reason, I would say, is because I watch a lot of such content online. I see such long form videos, especially podcasts, are very, very popular in the West. Maybe not so popular in UK, but certainly in the United States. And my previous organization, Guancha, is a very political. We talk about international politics all day long, and we watch the rise of Donald Trump very closely. And when Donald Trump announced, when his campaign got successful, when he was elected, the person he thanked was Joe Rogan. So Joe Rogan,
yes,
the biggest podcaster, was a kingmaker in that election, that decisive election. So I thought, wow, such influence. He could reach out to so many people, and those people were genuinely having a good time on his show, watching his content, even though it's controversial from time to time. So I thought, why can't we just create such videos in China? We talk China, we have a lot of interesting people. So why can't we have such interesting conversations? So I wanted to try this, but it seems to me that we have yet to find the way to conduct this thing.
Well, why do you say that, Chris? I'm sorry, I'm going to push. Why do you say that you are still yet to find a way of doing it? What seems to be the problem for you?
Oh, the problem is, in China, the stereotypical time span for Chinese online content is from 15 minutes to 20 minutes. That's a typical Chinese long form video. And those kind of conversation I do, they easily run into 1 hour, 1.5 hours. And I was having a hard time struggling with how to edit the conversation because I think, oh, they are so wonderful, but you have to listen to this part. There's a way of ramping up to that fascinating part of the story. You have to listen from the beginning, but our viewers just they can't wait. And I
Yeah.
received a suggestion from Douyin, the Chinese TikTok. We work with them very closely, and they suggest to me, Chris, you need to put the best part in the first 2 seconds. The first 2 seconds. If you don't get their attention in the first 2 seconds, you're done. I was like, how to get people so interested in a person with just in 5 seconds? Okay, give me 5 seconds. I can't do that. I can. I'm still struggling with that.
Yeah, I hear your pain, Chris, but I'll tell you where I come from. My thing, Chris, is like you. I love watching podcasts. I love watching long podcasts. I
Yeah.
love reading books that take me into how somebody thinks, different ways of doing things. I love watching opera. I love watching a long conversation with Bill Gates and that kind of stuff. I love watching things to learn so that I grow.
Mm.
And like you, I want to think that there's a lot more people that like you and I who want to watch things so that they grow, so that they learn.
Mm.
And here is what I suspect we are at the risk of doing: dumbing down our journalism to get a larger audience. But we need to ask ourselves why, which is why I asked you, Chris, why are you doing this? Okay. I think at the center of everything that we do is that why. Why are you doing this? And for
Mm.
me, that why, Chris, gets to answer the question, are we successful or are we not successful? You ask me now, am I successful? Absolutely. Do I want bigger numbers? Absolutely. Do I have big numbers? Not now, but I am very clear that history will prove you and I right. That
Mm.
the public, Chris, will begin to walk towards quality.
Mm.
The public will begin to walk towards long form.
Mm.
That the evidence out there, Chris, says the world is divided because we are consuming this fragmented content,
Mm.
which doesn't tell you the whole picture. We are consuming this 2.5 second content, which riles you, make you angry without knowing what the other 2 minutes were of the content. Therefore, the responsibility for you and I, Chris, is not so much to be swayed by the people that want the 2 seconds. Let TikTok and Douyin do whatever they're doing. But you and I, let's focus on content that is what I call stickability. This is content that people keep on coming back to. But Chris, we also have an opportunity. Let's use Douyin to get people to have a view into our content.
Mm.
So interestingly, Chris, we found that our small clips, the consumption of those clips is into millions. That's okay.
Yeah.
I would want millions to watch an episode like this, but it's not happening. But guess what? Each million that watches the TikTok clip, there's one or two people that come back to watch us. So I
Yes.
think it's important to ask ourselves, Chris,
Mm.
and to be very clear about what
Mm.
is the why of what we're doing.
Mm.
And if the why is accompanied by, we want to achieve long term goals, not just
Mm.
short term goals of getting 1 million people. You get at 10 million people. Why? Why do you want 10 million people? I want to affect Zimbabweans and the continent in a positive way. Okay. And I understand that that's a piece of work that is heavy lifting. It's not going to be easy because you want to engage people, you want to inform people. Chris, you and I have a big responsibility. The world is divided. There's so much toxicity. And that toxicity and the division, Chris, comes from the fact that we are a society, you and I, that lives in an era where technology has flooded us, drowned us with information, but we are the least informed people that have ever walked this planet.
Yeah, I completely agree. Sometimes I do self-reflection over my past career. The way I see it, I think, let me just begin by a Francis Bacon quote, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
If you say knowledge is power, then getting to know stuff is gaining power.
Yeah.
And certainly that will disrupt the pre-existing power hierarchy and power balance in a society. So those who are in the powerful positions, they will act, the elite class will act as gatekeepers to to control information, basically.
Yeah.
So the formation of knowledge is traditionally the profession of journalism is in the business of forming knowledge, informing people, right? You take raw material, which are the facts on the ground, you do some selection of facts, and also you process such information. And more often than not, this is my view, those people who are in the institutional media are swayed by political forces. So they will instill political biases in the narratives they create. So their analysis is not the reader's analysis. They're taking on things. It's not the reader's taking on things, but they present them as solid facts to people so that people skip the process, skip the step of thinking. They jump immediately to conclusion. So if they tell you, okay, China is bad, China is, let's say China is creating debt trap in Africa, and China is, taking over the world, the resources, and people will, okay, China is bad. They instead of just go do conduct investigation like investigative journalists do. So because people, the way we observe our environment, we only live within a few blocks. We go to work, we go home, we go to work, we go home. We don't know what's happening in the outside world. We rely very heavily on the kind of curated information we receive every day. So if we receive pieces of information from institutions with political agenda, though we are very subjected to biases and that kind of things. So I think traditional media is losing out in this regard, and I don't know whether you have previously I mentioned the case of Trump, and also before Trump was elected, Washington Post, they made a decision not to endorse any of the two, Kamala Harris or Trump, both any of those two candidates, and they say it was the decision of Jeff Bezos, the owner of the newspaper. And the owner of the newspaper wrote an op-ed next day saying, the hard truth is Americans don't trust media. So the traditional institutional media completely lost public trust.
That is true because of agendas associated with these big media companies and so. But we must also put the onus on the reader. You ask in terms of are the readers discerning in terms of what they're reading? Are they selective? What do they choose to read? Okay, and why are they reading? Or why are they listening to podcasts? Why are they listening to TikTok? What kind of world are we going to become if the reader is not discerning? If you recall that the fundamental principle of media was freedom of expression. The individual must express themselves. Stable societies, accountability, We are dependent and codependent on each other. We all need each other. But society throughout the world, Chris, is fragmenting. Your truth is no longer my truth. How can that be? How can that be? So I fear, Chris, that the issue that you and I are discussing right now is huge. And unfortunately, it is spinning out of control. Because everybody is now a publisher. Everybody now has a podcast. For me, as a Christian, there's a place in the Bible where, there's a Tower of Babel, where we are all talking but not understanding each other. I mean, so where is this going to end? Where you're talking to me, I'm not understanding you. You live in your own little ghetto, Chris. I live in my own little ghetto. I come from work, I go home, I've got my Facebook people, I've got my Dion people, and so forth. We have these clusters of people across social media who don't talk to each other, who don't know each other, who don't communicate.
Yeah, I can feel you. I definitely can feel you. I think you've raised a very interesting question. Why do people need to read news? Why do people listen to podcasts?
Yeah.
To me, I think there is this psychological benefit that you think you are relevant, that you think you are connected to the world, even though you maybe not, even though you may be very isolated in the basement, you're just scrolling computer screen, thinking that you understand what's happening remotely in Russia, and you're an armchair strategist telling people how to run big countries like China and America. In fact, you can never manage your own home. You don't even buy a grocery. That kind of thing happens. Yes, I think it's a world. The way I see it is that our division of labor is so thorough that we only need to excel or do in one aspect. You just do this and he just does that, and we combine our efforts. It's going to make the society run so that people are super absorbed into their own stuff, but they need to maintain this idea that somehow they are connected. They are not out of touch with the reality, but in fact they are. So that they need to take in information and need to take in the kind of stories about how other people perceive you, so you can have a understanding of your mutual relation in a sense. So I feel this business is experiencing a very significant transformation. I have another very encouraging new phenomenon I observe in China nowadays. It could be very interesting to you, because America, the previous administration was going to ban TikTok, Biden administration. Yeah. So they say you have a deadline, which is January 19th. After that, we're going to ban TikTok. And American TikTok users are flooding into Chinese social media platforms. They call themselves TikTok refugees. They flooded into China, and they interact with Chinese internet users directly without going through any intermediaries telling you that Chinese people are living miserably, or telling you American people are living a superfluous life. They just check with each other the items. What do you buy? How much do you spend on food? How much do you spend on clothing? How much do you spend on traffic fares and travel fares and etc., housing, etc., medical bills, education, so that people understand, have a broad, a vague, but more complete picture of each other's life. So you're not an abstract idea of Chinese coming, and they are not just the evil US imperialists. We are living people, living and breathing and trying to have happy life for ourselves. So in that way, people's distance is reduced tremendously by technology. We'll have to adapt to this, I think, to this changing technological landscape. I think journalists in the past have this role of, public knowledge. You're, in a way, you're educating people to be in pursuit of truth, in pursuit of, truth, basically. But then suddenly you find yourself, okay, I may not know the truth. I'm also investigating the truth. And there are people out there on the internet who could be closer and get to the bottom faster than I could. So I'm not a teacher anymore. I
Yeah.
need to learn. So in the end, I'm just an average person on the internet.
I think, Chris, you put your finger right onto it. Our responsibility, Chris, is so first of all, clearly, media, somebody's moved the cheese as far as media is concerned. And the game has changed big time. So for you and I to remain relevant, Chris, I want to posit that what we need to do is to be better informed than the public. Okay. So more experts, more qualified people, rather than commoditized news. I mean, commoditized news like somebody was run over by a car there. You can't that will never be in a newspaper anymore because it's going to be on Twitter, it's going to be on TikTok. So I think the challenge, Chris, where we will remain relevant is, can we be the source for investigative journalism? Can we be the source for analysis, expert analysis on things like climate change, if we agree that there's climate change, law, for instance, technology, for instance, because not everybody's going to be an expert on what's the chip to buy from NVIDIA and that kind of stuff. So there's going to be, for me, more specialization within our industries. So generalists will fall away because everybody is a generalist. So more specialists in business, more specialists in how to deal with AI and the advantages of dealing with AI, the pros and cons and so forth. So I'm thinking that there will still be that place for long form, deep journalism that provides the expertise that answers the questions that the public has. Let that long form, Chris, be informed. Let it be expert. When I'm saying expertise, not within the pejorative way of expertise. You're pushing a certain agenda, but just to be impartial, present the facts to people to make up their minds. I think there was still going to be that point. We are so immersed, Chris, in this noise, in this hate, in this toxicity, in this division, that more and more of us are going to hunger for real information, which is researched. We will find people coming back to good journalism. We will find societies and communities. We'll find people investing in local community titles that run a story about my school, where my child goes, and there's scores and that kind of stuff. It might be on the internet or whatever. People will hunger for real news. People will hunger for fact-check news. People will realize that spending so much time on WeChat, on WhatsApp and that kind of stuff just floods you with gossip, which is not real stuff. For me, I think the test, Chris, is going to be, where is society going to be in the next 10, 20 years? With what AI is doing, with fake news, with deep fake news. How do we deal with deep fake news when we are not experts at that? And Chris, I'm finding this in Zimbabwe, that the public, which worries me, does not care where they get their news from. One, the public does not care even if they're spreading fake news. Is this the same public that we want to set the agenda for the whole of society? The public that doesn't care where they get their news? The public that doesn't know the difference between fake news and real news? Should not somebody who is an expert come in and gatekeep for the good of society? Not corporates, but individuals like you and I, who have no agenda. Our only agenda is to sit and to listen to Chris and tell Chris's story.
Well, yeah, but that comes to the ultimately, who controls the definition of being good? What is good? Yeah,
I think we will ultimately, Chris, come to agreeing that killing somebody is bad.
Of course.
Okay. So those fundamental definition of what is good.
Mm-hmm.
Poisoning somebody is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Hating somebody is bad. Love. So we're going back to the old-fashioned values, Chris. The old-fashioned,
Yes.
the Confucian values. The Confucian values, Chris.
Yes,
Love thy neighbor.
I totally agree.
Respect your father. Respect your mother. Take care of your children. Educate your children. Love your neighbors and that kind of stuff. Old-fashioned values. Confucian values. My values as a Christian. Society will, and if we don't do that, then we are doomed. Then maybe those people that say machines are going to take over from us and destroy us, maybe they're right. Maybe those machines are going to come and do that because they don't have the values that we have. The old-fashioned Confucian values of building societies brick after brick. For me, Chris, it comes down to what are your values? What are your principles? What is your truth? My truth is loving my mother is a good thing. Loving my father is a good thing. Protecting my mother is a good thing. Stealing from my neighbor is a bad thing. Those kind of basic old-fashioned values. They're not going to be any new values that society and humanity is going to create. It's going back to those basic things. Love, compassion, mercy, goodness.
Yeah, I think especially in a time of great chaos and uncertainty, all nations, if they are unsure of where the future destination is, the best they can do is going back to their old traditions, because the traditions are what have gotten us so far.
Yeah.
And basically every civilization surviving to this day is a successful civilization. So it has to be some inherent goodness in those values, traditional values.
And Chris, guess what? Those inherent traditional values are the only thing we know.
Yeah.
They're the only thing we know. And humanity has lived for such a long time and has not invented any new values, apart from, and I want to use the Confucian values because it's something that you're familiar with. Society has not invented any new values apart from the values that are in Confucian values. Society has not invented any values apart from what I know from that comes from the Bible. Machine learning and everything else is coming in to learn stuff that you and I know and have done. But what we're doing away with, Chris, even as media is concerned, are those fundamental values. Caring for each other, loving each other, agreeing that there's a truth, and that truth is ABCD.
Yes. I wanted to go a little bit to, because you have said that media has played a tremendous role in shaping our understanding of our society. And also, we ultimately will have to embrace our traditional values when it comes to make a decision of what we really need to know about the world. So I want to ask you about general public in Zimbabwe and also by extension in South Africa. How do they get to know about China? And what do you think? Do you think they are getting sound information about China, or do you think there needs to be improvement in the kind of sort of information gap that we need to bridge?
Oh yeah. So the answer to your question is that people don't know much about China. That's the general public. They don't know much about China. Language is one of the, I think, hindrances that get in the way of Zimbabweans and Africans getting to know more about China. Distance is another thing. The complex issues involved, another thing. So to your question, there is need for China to up its game as far as communication is concerned. Whether it's a way of communicating in a language that the majority of the people understand, or it's a way of making media accessible in a way that people understand. But the bottom line is that people don't know much about China, that people rely on stereotypes about China. And those stereotypes, Chris, are informed by what people see, read, watch what they experience in their neighborhoods. I don't know how traveled you are, Chris, but there are Chinese everywhere. In Zimbabwe, there's a lot of Chinese, and they are into all sorts of things. So sometimes people face-to-face interaction with Chinese forms their views of the Chinese. Sadly, there's a stereotype which is negative about the Chinese. And those stereotypes are that they are exploitative, they are cruel, they are corrupt, because they come in and do business with government ministers who are known or assumed to be corrupt. That any business that they deal with, that they're engaged in, is not kosher business, is not above the board, as it were. But Chinese diplomats need to communicate better and communicate differently. There needs to be more of an exchange of information between the Chinese that are in particular individual countries with the locals that are there to dispel some of these notions. Just like, I had lunch, my wife and I had lunch with the Chinese ambassador only last week on Monday, actually. And, even I was blown away by the things that the Chinese ambassador was saying. There are good Chinese and bad Chinese. But the stereotype out there is that all Chinese are bad. They come in, they break rules, they destroy the environment and that kind of stuff. And maybe also, what kind of people leave China to go and do business abroad? I don't know what kind of people these are who leave China to come and do business abroad. Are they doing so well, or they go out because they see opportunities to make a quick buck and come back, and they don't care about the environment where they are doing business? So the bottom line, Chris, to answer your question is, no, people don't know much about Chinese. They need to know more about the Chinese. Yes, China needs to communicate differently. The embassies need to do more in getting the locals to understand what China is all about. Allow me to turn, Chris, and share with you. I'm currently reading this book. I finished reading it, rather. Can you see it? Yes.
Yes, it's by Jinkai, I know.
She has done a great job for me of telling the Chinese story in a manner that people understand it. I've just finished reading it, and I invited her to be a delegate at our annual Ideas Festival in Zimbabwe. And she interacted with people virtually, and people were hungry to learn. Just right now, my PA I bought a copy for somebody else who reached out to me and says, "Can you buy me this book?" And this book is now selling in Zimbabwe because I recommended this book to a lot of people, because it has made me understand the importance of culture in China, that Chinese love China, that is not every Chinese who's wanting to escape to the West and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of Western propaganda. And by the way, Chris, I've decided that going on, I'm going to be reading books on China by Chinese, so that I don't have Western gatekeepers telling me what China is. So China needs to get more Africans, Africans, people in Latin America and so forth, to go to China and experience China, to experience Chinese media, to have an engagement with Chinese diplomats and so forth. I've made it my own personal agenda, by the way, Chris, to learn more about China, but from Chinese authors rather than from somebody else. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, yes. I think it's a very important thing that you have mentioned, is that people don't have sources to get to know China. And it's the same here in China. When I want to find information on Zimbabwe, I search on English language channels. I Google, I use Wikipedia, I use YouTube, I watch your content, and all those content are predominantly international, global media in English. And I guess because Zimbabweans, they speak English. And when you want to know China, you go to an English language news website or information website, and you search for Chinese information about China. You don't go to a Chinese website telling you information on China. So, and that English language being the lingua franca of the world, I think, is one of the issues, because Chinese people, they are not multilingual.
No.
Only a fraction of the Chinese population, 1.4 billion people, a fraction of them can converse with people freely in English. And that's kind of problematic. I imagine a lot of encounters you have in Zimbabwe with Chinese people. You think, oh, these people, they like to stick to themselves. They don't respect local culture. They don't,
Yeah.
they don't know how.
Yeah. They don't know how.
To appreciate the local culture. So so in the end, they come across as cold or arrogant. But Chinese people are not arrogant, generally speaking. There are some, of course, I would say, like people everywhere. The Chinese people, there are good Chinese people, bad Chinese people, xenophobic Chinese people, warm Chinese people, all kinds of people.
Absolutely.
But in general, the people who go overseas, they want to take the risk of setting up their business abroad in another completely foreign environment, are those more adventurous people, and those people who are more open to the outside world. And it's generally assumed they are not, narrow-minded. They do not have a pre-made mindset about the stereotypes.
Yeah.
So, but I think a lot of these unfortunate misunderstandings are due to lack of information, a lack of interaction, and the lack of interaction to some extent is due to the disfamiliarity with each other's language. And the fact we are now talking to each other in English is a reflection to that fact that we cannot converse. I cannot talk to you. I don't know. Are you from Ndebele?
Yes, Ndebele. Yes.
Ndebele. The language is a Bantu language.
It's Ndebele. The language is Ndebele. So I speak Ndebele. It's spoken in South Africa. It's spoken in Zimbabwe. It's a fundamental point, Chris. It would be lovely if you were speaking in Chinese and I speaking in Ndebele, and we can talk. But that's going to take a long time. But that's the ideal place. I agree with you completely, Chris, on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not going to be a long time, I think, because, some technological gadgets, like you wear specs, and you can translate immediately what the other party is saying to the local language, and that is the Earth is shrinking very fast. Technology has done that.
Yeah.
But I think
absolutely
the more basic thing is, what do people need? Like you have mentioned earlier. The things we need in our life, the good life that we all want to live. The good life may not necessarily be materialistic, like how much money you make. It also has to do with your inner mentality, your inner peace. How do you reconcile with your social relations? You have lamented earlier about the fact that people are glued to their phones, that they are in total disregard of their social environment. The more intrinsic need is that people need to be in touch with other people. So there's this need that there's a fundamental need. Technology has just created a false feeling that you are connected somehow with the number of likes you receive. You are very popular, but in fact, you're probably just a miserable person in your own basement doing videos. Just we are so engrossed by the fact that technology has enabled us to better perceive. May not be better, may not be the right word. To perceive with greater precision and greater magnitudes the kind of relation we want to pursue in our life. But in fact, you could be wandering further and further away from the real interactions between people, and that's really sad. And I think as super normal people, super average person, that we probably will have to convey to our peers the more holistic approach to our lives, to connect with people. Our conversation will have to be more engaging, with them. So we ourselves will need to understand their needs, basically their psychological needs when they consume information online and otherwise. And I think that's a really challenging task for us.
That's a challenging task, Chris, and I think you posit a very it's a big thing. But what you posit also, Chris, is the fact that technology, as good as it is, has helped us lose our essence.
Mm.
We've lost the essence of who we are. And if you're going to go down, Chris, to asking the question, you asked the question rather, what are your basic needs? What are your basic needs? So the good and the bad that comes with technology, we need to be weighed up. The essence, what do I need? I need water to drink. I need food to eat, clean air. I need family. I think COVID taught you and I that the fact that we think technology can connect us is a lie. COVID proved that. We sat at home and we felt miserable. We wanted to go out and touch each other and hug each other and look each other in the eye. Chris, nothing is going to ever take that away, okay? Unless we become machines and we don't care about looking somebody in the eye, shaking somebody's hand and hugging them. So I go back, Chris, to the fundamentals of human essence. Touching somebody, talking to somebody, seeing somebody, feeling, and that's fundamental. It will never be reinvented. COVID 4 years ago showed us that that was a lie. We are now back to working in offices and we're hugging and whatever. So there are certain lessons, I think, rather certain things that are beautiful about who we are, that we have lost. And sometimes we continue celebrating the things that we've lost, rather celebrating the benefits of technology, completely blind of the fact that those benefits have come in with some costs. That does concern me. Technology has been great, but it has had a lot of negative things that we need to be aware of. Who are we? Who are we?
Yeah.
Why are we here on Earth?
Yeah. 2,500 years ago, there are philosophers who have been asking the same questions. Who are we? Why are we here? And what's our aim? And at that time, I think in Athens, and also in China, Confucius, and also in India, the Buddha, there was this also emergent technology that's writing. And the first, Confucius didn't write his analects. It was his disciples who decided to record his teaching, his words, record them down. But he didn't write the book. And also Socrates didn't like writing.
Yeah.
So they think the new technology of writing is causing humanity to lose essence, to lose memory. So we cannot memorize the truly important things in life. If you write things down, you will rely on that technology. You're not going to be lesser of a human. And well, the way I see it, technology is a tool. It's the person who controls the tool, who uses the tool that matters, and it's the person the people who control those tools, if they have ulterior motive of manipulating such tools, manipulating information, manipulating technology to create a society where people are just blindly, consuming meaningless footages of 10 seconds to achieve sensory gratification, and to forego the kind of love and affection that and truth and beauty in life that you can pursue as a living human being, the easier it is for them to control the society. It's easier. It's a very powerful way to manipulate the population, I think.
Chris, is it not? As you're talking, I'm reflecting on the conversation that you and I had, that there was a time when newspaper owners were perceived to be setting national agendas, international agendas. The journalists were setting the agenda. Chris, should we not be frightened that what is setting agenda as far as society is concerned are 5 or 6 big conglomerates with their algorithms? And that they are going to be doing so at an even faster pace with AI. So yes, we might say media got it wrong, but just like you're saying, technology is a tool. Newspapers and media were a platform, but that's gone. The biggest platform now are the technology companies, whose algorithm is deciding for a lot of people. I mean, interestingly, I was watching Jeff Bezos being interviewed by the New York Times, and Jeff Bezos says, he was asked, "Are you on Twitter from time to time?" He says, "Yes, I am. But I find myself staying longer because the algorithm takes me somewhere." This is Jeff Bezos. So the algorithm takes him somewhere. The power of these companies, Chris, we need to be looking at that. It's not so much an editor in a newspaper. It's not so much a publisher in a company. It's not so much a journalist. It's now the Googles of this world. It's Facebook. It's Tencent. It's Alibaba and all those kind of things. Should that not be the conversation? These are the new media companies. You and I are now tiny and irrelevant. But these guys are controlling billions of things. And they continue to gather large models, data, whatever. And it's becoming much more expensive to get into that space. You need to be a trillionaire to own the Washington Post and that kind of stuff. So the Washington Post is irrelevant. But things like these big corporations are becoming much more powerful. And they're the ones that are putting TikTok in front of you and their algorithm sending you somewhere else. I think there's a bigger conversation to be had there in terms of who actually has the influence right now. I think you and I are tiny within the larger scheme of things. We're tiny within the larger scheme of things. It's those big companies that we need to be looking at. It's those algorithms that are going to be even faster in giving away these tidbits of information to people, not so much journalists and publishers and newspapers.
That's why I said journalists probably, we need to stay humble and stay true to ourselves and to our goals. But I also think when people are, when algorithms are almost hegemonic in dictating what you read, what you perceive, the state of affairs everywhere, that might be true. But also there is human agency. Jeff Bezos, he mentioned he fell through rabbit hole from time to time. The algorithm had taken him to somewhere he couldn't have imagined. I experienced that from day to day. I think that's one of the best thing as a journalist has offered me. Because when I study a topic, I suddenly realize, oh, there's a whole area of things that I didn't know. Then I wanted to investigate further. And it presses me to even probe into matters, to gain understanding of everything that I was interested. I didn't know I would be interested, but then as soon as I found out, I became interested in that. And I think that kind of adventure, that's almost like intellectual adventure, is very important to human as a species and also to me as an individual. To have that kind of curiosity is vital to you, to everybody, I think, in the future, so that you wouldn't be blindly fed with meaningless, trivial information. Who slept with who, was a celebrity or whatever. You want to seek out truth that are most relevant to you, and that could be our job to encourage such curiosity in people.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, and that job, because what you're describing, Chris, is not what every person out there does to get to be interested in a story, dig deep, go layer by layer until it's like you're peeling an onion until you get to the heart of what you want. Not when you are consuming 2 seconds content in the move to the next one. I think I agree with you. That's going to be the heart of the matter. How do we remember what I said, that is the public discerning in what kind of content that they're consuming? Do they know the difference between fake content and genuine good content? Do they know that? Do they care about that? I think our responsibility is to do our work in a humble manner that makes people care about what we do. For people to realize that without a good media, without researched information, society is at risk. So the onus is on us, but we are fighting. The headwinds are huge. Those headwinds include the corporates. Those headwinds include the public, who don't seem to have time to engage with the stuff that we're doing. But let's not blame the customer. Let's do what we're supposed to do and do it well. Chris, it's been good chatting to you. I need to run. I really have thoroughly enjoyed this. Yeah.
Me too. I enjoyed it very much. And I hope our conversation will continue in the future, because I think it's a vital channel between our two countries, China and Zimbabwe.
Yes.
We need such conversation to be going forward.
Chris, I would love to do this more often. And I would love us to bring in even more people, people on my side, people on your side. I would love to have us, even having physical encounters where we get people in a room and we talk about the kind of things that we're talking about. But primarily, do Chinese understand Zimbabweans? Do Zimbabweans understand Chinese? How do we get to know each other? How do we get to understand each other? We need each other. We need each other. And for us to fully embrace each other, we need to understand each other. At the moment, ignorance breeds fear. Fear then sends us, tears us apart. So we need to understand each other so that we get to know each other. And that compassion, that curve, that love and care begins to come in again. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you. Very beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you. Yeah, take care.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye, Trevor.